We've shown you on the other motorcycle how the slave cylinder is attached from behind. This is the standard form of attachment. Cable attachment point. Very, very gently pull the rod out, attach it. If required, you can nip here with the pliers to ensure it doesn't come back out again. Very important is the 4 to 6 millimeters of free play here, so that when the clutch heat expands and the clutch activation lever starts to wander away from the slave cylinder, that we still have some free play here. And also very important is that the clutch return spring is no longer attached, as the HYMEC system is now responsible for any adjustment on the clutch. We've shown you previously how to fill a system on the motorcycle. It's considerably easier to fill a system when it's not on the motorcycle. Take the slave cylinder and inject a little bit of oil just to prime it in advance. Don't worry about losing a couple of drops. Then we take the line, the pressure line, with the 2 gasket washers and the banjo. And we attach the banjo bolt to the pressure line onto the slave cylinder. Always a good idea to consider which angle of exit you want your line to have before you do this. And then tighten the line very gently onto the gasket washers. Then take the bleed nipple and screw the bleed nipple into place. Again, you'll feel immediately where it is. There's no need to use any force. Then attach the pressure line to the master cylinder. During the bleeding process, it's very important to hold the slave below the level of the master cylinder. Then I attach my syringe with the hose onto the bleed nipple, and I open the bleed nipple about 1/3 of a turn to 1/2 a turn. If I now inject fluid into the slave cylinder, at some stage I'll be able to see it rising into the master cylinder. I need to be careful not to overfill. And through the process of suck and squeeze, I'm getting some air into the reservoir and I'm getting some air into the syringe. Very important not to overfill, and very important not to go below the level of the fluid entry in the reservoir, because I'll be sucking air there again in that position. If I do that a couple of times, at some stage there's no air left, or at least very little. In that position, I'm going to tighten the bleed nipple again. I'm going to remove the syringe. I'm going to clean the slave cylinder. then I can carefully pull the rod out of the slave cylinder. And then activate it to pull it back in. In this position I can see that I have roughly 1.5 centimeters to 2 centimeters at the ball end of the lever, which means that I still have air in the system. I put the syringe back on to the sleeve. Reopen the bleed nipple by about 1/3 of a turn. Yes, and I've just after sucking some air from the slave cylinder into the syringe, and I believe that that was the air that we had previously in the system. Now retighten the bleed nipple, 1/3 of a turn. Clean the sleeve once more, make sure that there's no more liquid. Very gently pull the rod out of the slave cylinder and then operate. Until I'm at hydraulic block. At this stage, the piston within the slave cylinder is now sitting against the rear cap, and in that position I have less than a centimetre of travel here at the lever, so I know that the system is fully bled. I can put the reservoir lid on, put the hose into the proper position, and my HYMEC is filled and ready to mount. When I get a new HYMEC in a box and I remove the HYMEC from the box, in this case it's an F800 HYMEC for a BMW model, some of our customers have been disturbed by the fact that the lever is blocked and I can do nothing with the HYMEC. The reason that the lever is blocked is because we test all of the HYMECs that leave here to make sure that there's no air in the system. If I pull very gently on the end of the rod with my fingers, then I extract the rod, and then it's possible to operate the HYMEC. When the HYMEC is then back in the position where the rod is sitting against the cap at the back of the HYMEC, in that position I have complete hydraulic block, as I showed you before. So it's not a problem with the HYMEC, it's simply the way that it comes in the box. Some customers have reported problems with hissing or slurping from the HYMEC slave cylinder and have asked us if this is a problem with the HYMEC. It's not a problem with the HYMEC. What happens in this instance is the cap at the rear of the HYMEC has a secondary function as a breather. If somebody rides into water on an off-road bike, operates the clutch, then they will suck water in behind the cap over this breather. We've also had reports that fine dust can also enter, very fine dust can also enter the cap. Simply a case of remove the cap, clean the water out with a soft cloth or a tissue cloth. The same applies for any dust that gets in there. And then, without sealing it using any Loctite or silicone sealant, simply replace the cap, tighten it back into position, and away you go again with your HYMEC, and it should no longer hiss or slurp. The final checks with your HYMEC system. If the lever will not touch the grip, that means that in this position it has bottomed out against the slave cylinder cap. That means too much free play on your slave cylinder. Reduce the amount of free play. If the slave cylinder has too little free play, it'll burn the clutch out. I think we've already explained that, so please be careful that you have 4 to 6 millimeters of free play as advised. To check if the clutch is separating properly with your new HYMEC, you have to run the motor and switch from first gear into neutral, from neutral into second gear, from second gear into neutral. If your clutch doesn't separate properly, you'll find yourself jumping from first gear into second gear and not finding neutral. So this is the best test to see if the clutch is separating properly. If the clutch doesn't separate properly, it's always helpful to increase the reach adjust to the furthest position, especially with the new clutch. Any last little bit of air which is in the system will find its way into the reservoir, and then you'll be able to set the reach adjust closer to the handlebar. If I set this completely at the handlebar on this motorcycle, I don't expect it to separate properly. On this particular machine, it'll separate completely, even on the smallest hand setting. Thank you for watching our HYMEC video. Enjoy your HYMEC, and if you have any questions to the system or any bits of advice for us or any tips for us, please send them to powersports@magura.com. Thank you.